Hey guys, week 7 of Super Rugby AU. I'm going to cover the Force versus the Waratahs and the Reds versus the Rebels in this video. If you want to scroll ahead to that specific game, you can just do so here at the bottom. If we look at the standings, you can see the Brumbies are still leading into this week, having their bye this week, but the whole table is messed up after last week with the Waratahs and the Rebels beating the two favourites to actually win this competition, the Brumbies and the Reds. So everything's a little bit messed up at this moment. Prediction wise, it's also horrible to make predictions. The only team that are basically out of the competition at the moment are the Force, but they are still a good team and they can still upset any team on any day. This week the Force moved to the Gold Coast. The weather is cloudy conditions, 19 degrees Celsius. Referee Nick Barry, he loves running rugby, so that does bode well for the Western Force. History-wise, it does favour the Waratahs, but as I've said before, you can't really go history-wise with the Western Force because they've been out of the competition for years. But what we can look at is the game that these two played earlier this year or in this AU season, where the Waratahs beat the Western Force by 9 points. The end score there was 23-24. The Force wouldn't want 5 losses in a row in this competition, but they've been in basically every game except for the Brumbies one so far. So I think they've been pretty good so far. 3 out of 4 of the games they've been in it to win it. The Waratahs, 2 out of 5 games so far they've won, so inconsistent from them. They smashed the Reds last week with 45-13. I did not expect that. I don't think a lot of people expected them to take it that far, so any team would be wary of them and any predictor would be wary of them. Going into the two teams, the Force legend Cowan comes into the front row to strengthen an already good pack for them. Longbottom, who's been scrumming really well for them at number 3. Cowan's opposite number is also brought into this game, Tatera Faulkner. The Waratahs scrum was very strong last weekend, so I think this one will be close between these two teams. It's a complete second row overhaul for the Waratahs, with Simmons coming back, their captain. It's a man that makes my dream team all the time, but so does Fergus Lee Warner for the Western Force. He's just a tackling machine and he's all over the park. Another guy that's over the park all the time for the Western Force is his teammate Thrush, who just still loves going into the defensive line. He loves running into it. So that's a good combination for the Western Force. The Force's loose forwards are all similar type of players. They are hard runners and good defenders. The debutant Koteka, I hear, is basically the same type of player as well. And they are playing against a good combination as well in Swinton, Hooper and Jack Wedgie Dempson. I think it's a good combination. Hooper is going to be the youngest player to ever hit 150 Super Rugby caps. He's been playing forever, so I can see it happening. He's never injured as well. And I think this is just going to be two loose forward packs that's just exciting to watch. The hard hitters all over the park. It's a great game to watch in the loose forwards department. In the back line, Pryor is back for the Force. He's their captain and it's a guy they heavily rely on, especially for his consistent goal kicking. He's up against Gordon for the Waratahs, who scored a hat-trick last week of all things. That doesn't happen a lot, especially for a number 9. He was just very busy on attack. It was his first game, so things changed around the first time when he actually started for the Waratahs. And Wallaby hopeful Will Harrison at number 10 is up against John O'Lance, who will want to show a thing or two to the youngster. But the Force should beware because you can't give away a penalty in a silly area against the Waratahs because Harrison will punish you. He is very consistent with the boot. The centers in Hunt and Foketti were brilliant last week. They were actually better last week in distribution than usually. They are these hard-hitting guys that like carrying it to the line. Last week they were brilliant distributors. Hunt, he's added a lot to his game with a lot of subtle touches. His coach wants him to become a Wallaby as well. He said that in this week. I don't know what you Australians think about that. While he might have added subtle touches to him, Kahui, there's nothing subtle about the guy. He's physical as possible. He would want to give Hunt a couple of hard times with a hard defensive tackle. But Godwin, on the other hand, he brings the speed on the outside for the Force. Out wide, Lacey is back for the Western Force. Ralston at number 14 has been impressive this whole season. I say he's a future Wallaby, and they need to sign him before he gets snapped up by another team. Talking about signing a contract, Ram, he has signed a 2-year extension with the Waratahs. He's showing great promise for them. And we all know what Maddox can do at number 15 for the Waratahs. He's had a great season so far. Both teams have a lot of movements on their benches. The Force, the guys you have to look out for and the guys that can really have some impact on the game is Heiberg, Frisbee, Uester, and then McGregor or Juster. I don't know how you pronounce that in Australia. The Waratahs, the guys to look out for is basically all the guys in red. Bell, though, in number 17, his scrummaging looks a little bit better after he came on last week against the Reds until Tupou came on again. Tupou likes targeting Bell in the scrums. All in all, this is a difficult one to call with both teams being pretty unpredictable. The Force haven't won anything so far, but they've looked to be in it in 3 out of their 4 games so far. The Waratahs, they are not in the best form, not the best season they've had in a long time. But last week they completely thrashed the Reds. Who would have expected that? Did they turn a new leaf and they are a completely new team? Can you expect that on a regular basis from them? The Force, they had an off weekend last weekend, so they've been preparing for a long time for this week, though this last week everything probably changed in their preparation. So as I said, it's not an easy one to make, so I'd probably just go by most recent form and back the Waratahs to win by 12 points, but as I said, it's very unpredictable. It's a crazy one to call. Anything could happen here. Next up, the Reds return home after one of the worst games in this season so far last week against the Waratahs. The Rebels, though, they had one of the best games of rugby in, well, a long time. And they've thrown basically this whole competition wide open by beating the Brumbies 30 points to 12. And I also think they've changed their things around a little bit. They are gaining some form. They had a loss in the start, then a draw, and then 3 wins in a row. So they are gaining some form, the Rebels. The conditions, light rain, so same conditions that the Rebels thrashed the Brumbies in last week, and the Reds, yeah, they struggled a bit with rain. The referee, Damon Murphy, he's been the go-to guy in Australian rugby this year so far. History favours the Rebels. Remember, last time these two played was in this AU season, and it ended up in a draw even after extra time. You can see the Rebels are confident in their team, only making one change to their team. Faumasili, the giant of their squad, coming in. His opponent is also a change for the Rebels, Straker coming in. And it's a difficult one to call. Whose scrum actually wins? Tupou's or Faumasili's? It's a difficult one to call. I'd probably back the Reds if I just had to choose now. They'd probably win more of the scrums. The second row, though, this isn't such a close call. The Reds throw-ins have been disastrous so far. As for the Rebels, they have Philip and Hosea, who've been pretty constant in their form in the lineouts. They should have the upper hand in this game. Though on the park, just in general play, Blythe and Salakaya Lotto, they are busy players. In the loose forwards, I didn't think it would work as well as it did for the Rebels last week with Wilkin and Kameni. They impressed me last week. They announced themselves to me. I didn't know them that well. They are facing a tougher opponent, in my opinion, though, than last week in loose forwards. With the Reds bringing in McWright, they just have a game changer over there. McWright should start a lot more. Wilson versus Naisarani, I see this as a Wallaby tryout game between them. Wilson, a very busy guy on the park. Naisarani, the same thing. Both of them like scoring tries. I can see this going pretty well for both of them. At number 9 for the Reds, they finally bring in who's probably the best number 9 currently in Australia. McDermott is back after being benched for 2 weeks for no apparent reason. The game completely changed last week when he came on in the second half, in the start of the second half. I mean, the score for the second half was, I think, 5-7, if I remember correctly. The Rebels continue with their 10-12 combo of last week, which worked brilliantly. Deegan really impressed me in how he combined with Tumua. They just kicked the Brumbies back into their own half the whole time in the wet weather conditions. The Brumbies just fumbled the ball all the time. So the Reds would want to look out for that. They do have a back three that likes to be very close to the action. But that being said, the Reds aren't the Brumbies. You can't kick to them and expect them to kick the ball back. If they have the ball, they don't like kicking it back. They like running it back. And this week, Deegan isn't up against the young Brumbies number 10. He is up against James O'Connor, who's a lot more experienced and will want to put some pressure on him. Stewart will have Tumua covered on the defense. Magnay versus Paisami. I think this is going to be a very physical encounter. And out wide, Pataya is welcomed back to play. He's up against a fellow Wallaby in Kiribeti. Both of them are game-changing players. The Reds moved Campbell back to fullback. I think this is where he should be. I think he suits the Reds at fullback a little bit better than Hegarty. Just their style of play, he suits better. Hegarty is basically the opposite of what the Reds like doing. It's a good guy to bring on if you want to change the game completely. On the benches, both sides made a few changes. Nongo still gets his chance to prove himself again at number 18. He really struggled last week when he came on in the scrums and actually got a yellow card for it. The Rebels, they went with a 6-2 split, forwards to backs on the bench. So they clearly think that they could win this game in the latter stages with the forwards. Again, this is such a difficult one to call because of last week. Before last week, I would have probably said for this game the Reds would have a win. But now I'm thinking a bit about it. Looking at things, the Reds actually are a bit out of form if you do look at their recent history. While the Rebels, they are hitting form. They have a couple of wins now in a row as well. The bookies are saying the Reds by 2. I'm going to contradict that. I know it's a bit of a risk, but I'm going to go the Rebels by 1 point in this one. Let me know your predictions for both games down in the comments below, guys. If you want to check out any of these other videos next to me, do so. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more action next week. And then I'll see you for the next one. Cheers.